Listen to me carefully, because what I am about to say will change the way you see pain, betrayal, and every moment you are made to feel small. The greatest mistake a narcissist ever made was underestimating what God placed inside you. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought your patience meant defeat. They thought your kindness was something to exploit. But they never understood that when God allows you to be pressed, it is not to destroy you, it is to reveal a power you did not know you carried, a strength that cannot be manipulated, a dignity that cannot be broken. You did not lose when you encountered a narcissist. You are not defeated. You are not ruined. What happened was exposure. God allowed you to see what happens when pride, control, and emptiness try to dominate a soul that was created to grow, to expand, to walk in truth. A narcissist survives on reactions, on attention, on your emotional exhaustion. They feed on your confusion and your self-doubt. But here is the truth that will shake them to their core. The moment you stop trying to fight them on their level, the moment you stop explaining yourself, defending yourself, or proving your worth, something breaks inside them. Because the only way to make a narcissist regret everything is not through revenge, not through words, not through confrontation, but through becoming so whole, so grounded in God, so unshakably peaceful that they can no longer reach you. You must understand this deeply. A narcissist does not regret because you argue better. They do not regret because you expose them publicly. They regret when they realize they have lost access to your spirit. They regret when they see that the power they thought they had over you no longer exists. They regret when your life begins to flourish without their permission, without their approval, without their presence. And this is where God enters the story in a way that no human strategy ever could. God never intended you to remain trapped in someone else's dysfunction. God never designed you to shrink so that someone else could feel big. The moment you decide to align your identity with God, instead of with the lies spoken over you, everything begins to shift. Your posture changes, your energy changes, your eyes change. You stop seeking validation from someone who was never capable of giving it. You stop chasing closure from someone who thrives on keeping wounds open. And without saying a word, without lifting a finger, you begin to rise. A narcissist's greatest fear is not exposure, it is irrelevance. They cannot survive where they are no longer needed, no longer admired, no longer feared. When you detach emotionally and spiritually, when you stop reacting to their provocations, when you stop allowing them to pull you into cycles of guilt and confusion, you step into a realm of authority that terrifies them. Because now they are facing something they cannot control. A person whose sense of self comes from God alone. Do not underestimate the power of quiet transformation. When God begins to rebuild you, it does not happen with noise. It happens in stillness. It happens when you wake up one day and realize you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself. It happens when their words no longer echo in your mind. It happens when your decisions are no longer shaped by fear of their reaction. And this internal shift produces an external reality that no narcissist can ignore. They will watch you from a distance and not recognize you. The version of you that was easy to manipulate is gone. The version that apologized for existing has disappeared. In its place stands someone who knows their worth is not negotiable. And that is when regret sets in, not as a dramatic confession, but as a silent realization that they lost something they can never get back. Understand this: God does not need you to humiliate anyone. God does not need you to destroy anyone. God simply needs you to obey the call to grow, to heal, to become. When you focus on your spiritual alignment instead of their behavior, when you invest in your purpose instead of your pain, you create a contrast so powerful that it becomes unbearable for someone who lives on control. A narcissist expects you to stay broken. They expect you to orbit around their moods, their needs, their ego. When you step away and build a life anchored in God, you dismantle the illusion they live by. Your joy becomes proof that they were never the source of your strength. Your peace becomes evidence that they were never the center of your world. Your progress becomes a mirror reflecting their stagnation. This is why silence becomes louder than any argument. This is why growth becomes sharper than any accusation. This is why your obedience to God becomes the ultimate reckoning. Because while they are stuck replaying the past, you are being prepared for a future that does not include them. Let me speak to your heart now. The pain you endured was not meaningless. Every moment of confusion trained you to recognize truth. Every tear refined your discernment. God was not absent while you were being mistreated. God was teaching you how to stand without needing approval, how to love without losing yourself, how to walk away without bitterness. And when you apply these lessons, when you embody them fully, you become untouchable. A narcissist cannot stand someone who is whole. They cannot manipulate someone who is self-aware. They cannot dominate someone who has surrendered their identity to God. This is where their regret begins, not in dramatic words, but in restless nights, in unfulfilled relationships, in the haunting awareness that they encountered someone they could not break, someone who escaped their grasp stronger than before. You do not need to announce your healing. You do not need to prove your happiness. God will display your transformation in ways that speak for themselves. Your calm will unsettle them. Your boundaries will confuse them. Your refusal to engage will frustrate them. And your continued ascent will remind them of what they lost when they chose manipulation over respect. This is not about punishment. This is about alignment. When you align with God, everything that was built on falsehood begins to crumble on its own. You are not responsible for their regret. You are responsible for your obedience. And obedience to God always produces elevation. There will come a moment when they realize they no longer have power over your emotions. When their name no longer triggers anxiety, when their memory no longer carries weight. That moment is not loud, but it is final. And in that moment, without confrontation, without revenge, without hatred, you will have done the one thing a narcissist can never recover from. You will have moved on completely. God is not calling you to fix them. God is calling you to free yourself. God is not asking you to relive the trauma. God is asking you to rise above it. And as you rise, as you build, as you walk forward with dignity and faith, the regret they carve will not come from what you said or did, but from who you became. You must allow yourself to believe that your future is bigger than the pain you survived. You must allow God to redefine your identity beyond the labels placed on you by someone who could not love properly. The more you grow, the more you grow, the more you walk in quiet confidence, the clearer it becomes that they misjudged you completely. And this is the divine paradox. You are hurt, but you are not defeated. You are delayed, but you are not denied. You are tested, but you are not abandoned. God was shaping a version of you that no narcissist could ever control. And when they see that version, when they realize the door is closed, the access is gone, the influence is broken, regret becomes unavoidable. Do not rush the process. Let God complete the work. Let your life speak. Let your peace testify. Let your growth stand as evidence. Because the greatest response to manipulation is transformation. The greatest answer to control is freedom. And the greatest way to make a narcissist regret everything is to become so fulfilled by God that their absence feels like relief. Their presence feels unnecessary, and their opinion no longer matters as you continue to walk forward stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the purpose that was placed inside you long before they ever entered your life. Carrying a strength that does not seek validation, a faith that does not waver under pressure, a clarity that refuses to return to chaos, knowing that what God restores, no one can diminish. What God elevates, no one can control, and what God frees can never again be owned by anyone who thrives on manipulation. As you step further into the life you were always meant to live, unbothered, unbroken, and unmoved by the past that once tried to define you, There is a deeper dimension you must understand, because the battle with a narcissist was never merely emotional, it was spiritual. What they tried to drain from you was not just energy, it was vision. They attempted to cloud your ability to see yourself the way God sees you. They wanted to define you by your reactions, by your wounds, by your moments of doubt. But God defines you by purpose, not by pain. And the moment you reclaim that truth, the entire narrative changes. A narcissist believes they are the center of every story. They believe people exist as extensions of their needs. When you were under their influence, they trained you to doubt your instincts, to question your memories, to second guess your worth. But God never intended your mind to be a prison. God intended it to be a place of clarity, authority, and discernment. When your thinking aligns with God, confusion dissolves. When your identity aligns with God, manipulation loses its grip. This is why healing must go deeper than behavior. You are not here merely to act unbothered, you are here to become unmovable. Acting strong still leaves room for collapse. Becoming rooted in God creates permanence. When your sense of self is anchored in God, no one can rewrite your reality. No one can distort your truth. No one can convince you that love requires self-erasure. A narcissist regrets not when you look happy on the outside, but when you no longer seek them internally, when their voice disappears from your decision-making, when you stop measuring your value through their approval. That is when the loss becomes real, because now they face the truth that you were never dependent on them. You were only temporarily disconnected from yourself. God restores by reconnecting you to who you were before the damage and then elevating you beyond that version. The wisdom you carry now was forged in survival. The discernment you have now was sharpened by deception. The strength you possess now was developed under pressure. You are not returning to who you were. You are emerging as someone far more grounded, far more aware, far more powerful. A narcissist cannot survive around someone who sees clearly. They rely on emotional fog. They rely on chaos. They rely on unpredictability. When you become stable, consistent, and self-led under God, their tactics collapse. They no longer know how to reach you because you are no longer vibrating at the frequency of fear or longing. You have shifted into alignment, and alignment creates authority. Let me tell you something crucial. Forgiveness does not mean access. Compassion does not mean tolerance. God does not ask you to sacrifice your sanity to prove your goodness. God values wisdom over martyrdom. Walking away from manipulation is not bitterness, it is obedience to truth. And when you obey truth, you are protected from cycles that were never meant to repeat. The narcissist will attempt to re-enter your life when they sense your growth. They are drawn to light they cannot generate themselves. They will test your boundaries to see if the old version of you still exists. But you must understand, boundaries are not walls of anger. They are doors of discernment. And God honors boundaries that preserve peace. When you do not react, when you do not explain, when you do not reopen doors God has closed, something profound happens. You reclaim your time, you reclaim your emotional bandwidth, you reclaim your future. And this reclamation creates a void in the narcissist world because they depended on your reactions to feel significant. Regret grows in silence. It grows when they realize their influence expired. It grows when they see you no longer orbit around their existence. It grows when they understand they are replaceable, not by another person, but by your own wholeness. That realization is devastating to someone whose identity is built on control. You must also release the need to witness their regret. God does not promise you a front row seat to someone else's awakening. God promises you peace. Chasing validation through their remorse keeps you emotionally tied to them. True freedom is when their realization becomes irrelevant to your joy. Your assignment now is not to look back, but to build forward, to invest in your calling, to strengthen your spirit, to cultivate discipline, peace, and vision. As you grow, your life becomes evidence that manipulation failed. Your stability becomes proof that healing is real. Your joy becomes confirmation that God restored what was nearly stolen. Understand this truth deeply. A narcissist measures success by dominance. God measures success by transformation. While they remain trapped in cycles of ego and emptiness, you are evolving into someone who can love wisely, choose carefully, and live fully. That contrast is not accidental. It is the outcome of surrendering to God instead of surrendering to fear. The pain taught you what peace costs. The chaos taught you the value of stillness. The confusion taught you the power of clarity. God wastes nothing. Even what was meant to diminish you has been repurposed to define you. And when you walk with this awareness, you no longer fear losing anyone who cannot honor your growth. A narcissist regrets when they realize you are not the problem, when they see the same patterns repeating with others, when they notice that everyone else eventually leaves or collapses, and when they see you thriving, grounded, and emotionally free, the truth becomes unavoidable. But by then, you are no longer available to witness it. This is the divine reversal. What once drained you now fuels your wisdom. What once silenced you now sharpens your voice. What once controlled you now confirms your strength. God has turned the tables not through confrontation, but through elevation. You are no longer fighting for recognition. You are no longer trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You are no longer shrinking to maintain connection. You are expanding to honor the life God entrusted to you. And as you continue to walk forward, your presence will carry weight without force. Your silence will carry meaning without explanation. Your peace will speak louder than any argument ever could. And the journey that once broke you will stand as the foundation that now holds you steady, rooted in God, unafraid of the past, unattached to what no longer serves you, and fully aligned with the future unfolding before you. As you keep rising, keep growing, keep choosing truth over trauma, clarity over chaos, freedom over familiarity, knowing that the greatest victory was never making someone regret losing you, but realizing you never needed them to become everything God already designed you to be. There is another truth that must be spoken, because many people think the battle ends when the narcissist leaves their life. But God knows the real work begins when silence arrives. Silence reveals what noise was hiding. In the quiet, unresolved emotions surface, unanswered questions rise, and the temptation to revisit the past appears disguised as reflection. This is where discipline becomes spiritual warfare. God calls you not to revisit what broke you, but to refine what was awakened inside you. Every time you resist the urge to replay old conversations, you strengthen your authority. Every time you choose presence over rumination, you reclaim territory that was once occupied by fear. A narcissist wants you to live in the past because that is where they still feel powerful. God calls you to live in the present because that is where freedom is exercised. When you stop rehearsing what should have been said and start embodying who you are becoming, the emotional tether dissolves. You realize that closure was never something they could give. Closure is clarity, and clarity comes from God. There is a sacred shift that happens when you stop asking why it happened and start asking what it produced. Pain becomes wisdom when examined through truth. Loss becomes direction when interpreted through purpose. God does not answer every question you ask, but God reveals everything you need to know to move forward. The narcissists wanted to keep you dependent on explanations. God teaches you to live empowered by understanding. You must also understand that narcissistic control is rooted in insecurity. They try to dominate because they cannot sustain themselves internally. They borrow identity from reactions. They steal energy because they cannot generate peace. When you stop supplying emotional fuel, their internal emptiness becomes unavoidable. This is not something you orchestrate. It is something that happens naturally when you step into alignment. God never designed you to be consumed by someone else's inner chaos. God designed you to be a steward of your own soul. When you take responsibility for your inner world, you break agreements you never consciously signed. Agreements with guilt, agreements with self-doubt, agreements with over-explaining. And when those agreements are broken, the hold they had on you disintegrates. There will be moments when memories surface unexpectedly. Not because you are weak, but because healing is layered. In those moments, do not judge yourself, anchor yourself, speak truth into your thoughts. Remind yourself that you are no longer negotiating your worth. Remind yourself that God has already validated your existence. The mind obeys repetition. So repeat what is real, not what is familiar. A narcissist regrets most when they see consistency in you. Not a temporary glow, not a reactive happiness, but sustained peace. Consistency exposes that your transformation is not a performance. It proves that you did not move on to provoke them. You moved on to honor yourself. That realization is unbearable to someone who believed you were dependent on their presence to function. You are not obligated to correct the narrative they tell about you. Truth does not require your defense. God is not intimidated by misrepresentation. When your life aligns with integrity, lies collapse under their own weight. Let people believe what they want. Your assignment is not to manage perception, but to maintain alignment. There is power in being misunderstood while remaining grounded. Narcissists rely on public confusion to maintain control. God relies on time to reveal truth. When you trust time, you stop rushing outcomes. When you trust God, you stop forcing justice. Peace grows where patience is practiced. Another layer of regret emerges when the narcissist realizes they cannot replace you. They may find new attention, but they cannot replicate your essence. They may mimic connection, but they cannot recreate authenticity, because what you carried was not something they gave, it was something God placed within you. And once they lose access to that, they feel the absence even if they cannot name it. You must resist the temptation to romanticize the past. Intensity is not intimacy. Chaos is not passion. Control is not care. God teaches you the difference through healing. As your nervous system calms, you realize how much energy you were expending just to survive. Peace becomes unfamiliar before it becomes normal. Do not mistake unfamiliar calm for emptiness. It is space being prepared for something healthier. Your discernment is sharper now. You noticed red flags earlier. You listen to your body. You trust your instincts. This is not suspicion, it is wisdom earned. God does not heal you so you can return to the same patterns with new language. God heals you so you can choose differently without guilt. A narcissist regrets when they see that you are no longer impressed by surface charm. When flattery no longer moves you. When urgency no longer pressures you. When manipulation no longer confuses you. That level of clarity cannot be negotiated with. It can only be accepted, and acceptance is difficult for someone who thrives on illusion. There is also a generational dimension to your healing. When you break free from manipulation, you interrupt patterns that may have existed long before you. God often chooses one person to end cycles others normalized. The resistance you faced was not random. It was the pushback that comes when old systems sense their end. Your obedience created a fracture in a pattern that relied on silence. Do not underestimate the authority of a healed mind. When your thoughts are no longer hijacked by fear, your decisions carry weight. You stop settling, you stop rushing, you stop mistaking attention for affection. And that discernment reshapes your future in ways you cannot yet fully see. The narcissist may never verbally acknowledge regret. Do not wait for that. Regret is revealed through absence, through restlessness, through repeated attempts to regain relevance. But by the time that happens, your heart has moved into a different season. God does not delay your future to validate your past. You are learning to choose yourself without selfishness. You are learning to love without self-betrayal. You are learning that loyalty to truth is greater than loyalty to history. These lessons did not come cheap, but they came complete. Nothing is missing, nothing is wasted. As you continue forward, you will notice some things subtle but profound. Your energy attracts different experiences now. Conversations feel safer. Opportunities feel aligned. Relationships feel mutual. This is not coincidence. This is the result of inner recalibration. When you change internally, your external world reorganizes. The narcissist taught you what you will never tolerate again. God teaches you what you deserve. One lesson revealed the wound, the other restores vision. And as vision sharpens, attachment to the past weakens. You are not cold for choosing distance. You are not proud for choosing peace. You are not heartless for choosing yourself. God does not measure goodness by how much you endure, but by how well you steward the life entrusted to you. There is strength in walking away without needing the other person to understand. There is maturity in releasing the need to be chosen by someone who could not choose integrity. And there is freedom in knowing that what is meant for you does not require manipulation to remain. The path ahead is quieter, but it is clearer. Less dramatic, but more stable. Less intense, but more fulfilling. This is the terrain where lasting joy grows. This is where purpose unfolds without pressure. This is where your life becomes a testimony of restoration rather than survival. And as you keep walking, grounded, discerning, and anchored in God, every step forward confirms that the chapter you left behind no longer has authority over the story still being written. As your spirit settles into its rightful place, no longer reaching backward for validation, no longer bracing for impact, no longer preparing for chaos, but moving steadily into a life shaped by wisdom, protected by clarity, strengthened by faith, and guided by a presence that does not manipulate, does not confuse, does not withdraw love to gain control, but leads you onward, deeper into freedom, deeper into pose, deeper into the fullness of who you were always meant to be under God. Now I ask you to pause and look inward, not with judgment, not with shame, but with honesty before God. Ask yourself where you have been living beneath your calling, where you've been tolerating what God never assigned to you, where you have been shrinking to preserve peace that was never real. This is your moment of decision. Not a dramatic moment, not a loud one, but a sacred one. God is calling you to stand fully in who you are without apology, without fear, without a need for permission. Let this be the turning point where you stop defining yourself by what wounded you and start defining yourself by what God placed within you. You are not here to survive cycles of manipulation. You are here to walk in clarity, to live with intention, to move with purpose. God did not restore your vision so you could look backward. God restored your vision so you could walk forward with confidence and wisdom. Examine your life and remove what drains your spirit. Protect what brings peace. Honor what aligns with truth. Let your daily choices reflect reverence for the life God entrusted to you. Draw closer to God, not out of fear, but out of alignment. Not out of desperation, but out of devotion. When you walk with God, you do not need to prove your strength. Your life becomes the proof. Release the final attachment to the pain that shaped you and embrace the purpose that awaits you. Step fully into the authority of self-respect, discernment, and inner stillness. Let your presence carry peace. Let your silence carry strength. Let your growth carry testimony. You are not defined by who tried to control you. You are defined by the God who freed you. Walk forward now with a steady heart and a clear mind. Choose truth over familiarity. Choose peace over approval. Choose purpose over pain. Let every step you take reflect gratitude for how far you have come and faith in where God is leading you, knowing that the life unfolding before you is not an escape from the past, but a fulfillment of destiny, lived with courage, integrity, and unwavering trust in God. Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear is not comfort for your emotions. It is a command for your destiny. There is a person tied to your assignment, a soul connected to your obedience, a life fastened to your perseverance. And if you walk away, you do not merely leave a relationship. You interrupt a divine intention that God planted in your hands. This is not coincidence. This is not emotional attachment. This is not weakness. This is responsibility. God does not randomly connect lives. When He places someone in your path and presses them upon your spirit again and again, it is because heaven has marked that person as your mission, and heaven does not take missions lightly. I want you to understand something deep and unshakable. God does not send people into your life only to make you happy. He sends people to shape you, stretch you, refine you, and sometimes to exhaust every selfish impulse inside you until only obedience remains. There are people who come to bless you, and there are people who come to be blessed through you. The tragedy of our time is that many people walk away from their mission because it becomes uncomfortable, inconvenient, or demanding. But God never called you to comfort. He called you to covenant. And covenant always costs something. There is a reason you cannot forget them. There is a reason their pain stays with you even when you try to move on. There is a reason their face appears in your prayers without invitation. This is not weakness. This is not obsession. This is assignment. God has wired your spirit to recognize responsibility before your mind understands purpose. And many people try to silence what God has activated because they are afraid of what obedience will require from them. You must hear this with clarity. When God assigns you to someone, He also gives you the grace to carry them, the patience to endure them, and the strength to stand when everything inside you wants to quit. But grace only flows where obedience remains. The moment you decide to abandon what God assigned, the strength begins to drain, confusion rises, and peace disappears. That is why running feels heavier than staying. That is why escape feels exhausting. That is why leaving does not bring relief. Because you are not meant to leave. Some of you have tried to replace them. You have tried to distract yourself. You have tried to convince yourself that someone else will do. But the Spirit knows what the mind pretends to forget. God does not duplicate assignments. He does not hand your mission to another because you became tired. Heaven waits. Heaven watches. Heaven measures your response. And the question is not whether this person deserves your commitment. The question is whether you trust God enough to obey Him when obedience stretches your heart beyond comfort. This person is your mission, not because they are perfect, but because God chose you as the vessel through which His patience, His wisdom, and His presence would flow. Missions are rarely attractive. Missions are often messy. Missions often test every boundary of pride and self-interest. But missions are how God reveals His power through ordinary lives. And if you abandon this assignment, you do not just walk away from a person. You delay a miracle that God intended to release through you. You must understand how God works. He does not shout instructions from the sky. He speaks through burdens. He speaks through compassion. He speaks through the quiet pull that refuses to leave your heart. When God wants to save a life, He does not always send lightning. Sometimes He sends you. And that is why the weight feels heavy. That is why your heart feels invested. That is why walking away feels like betrayal, not just to them, but to something holy inside you. Do not confuse exhaustion with permission to quit. Many people misinterpret fatigue as a sign to leave, when in reality it is a sign that they are close to breakthrough. The enemy attacks hardest when transformation is near. And if you leave now, you leave at the moment when endurance is about to produce fruit. God never wastes perseverance. Every tear you hold back, every prayer you whisper, every time you stay when it would be easier to go, it is being recorded in eternity. You are not holding on to them because you are afraid to be alone. You are holding on to them because God has anchored your spirit to theirs for a season of purpose. And seasons only end when God decides, not when emotions fluctuate. Some of you are waiting for them to change before you stay. But God is waiting for you to stay so that change can happen. Transformation often requires proximity. Healing often requires consistency. And growth often requires someone who refuses to abandon the process halfway. I need you to hear this clearly. God does not assign missions to people who are weak. He assigns them to people He trusts. If this person has been placed in your care, it is because God saw something in you that could carry what others would drop. He saw patience where others would panic. He saw faith where others would flee. He saw endurance where others would give up. And now the very strength God saw is being tested. Do not let temporary frustration make a permanent decision. What you call delay, God calls preparation. What you call resistance, God calls refinement. And what you call burden, God calls privilege. It is a privilege to be trusted with a soul. It is a privilege to be chosen as a vessel. It is a privilege to be part of someone's turning point. And privileges are rarely comfortable. You may not see immediate results, but obedience is never wasted. God works in layers, not moments. The seed you plant today may not break the surface tomorrow, but it is alive beneath the soil. And the day will come when what you have nurtured in silence will rise with undeniable power. But that day only comes if you stay long enough to see it. Some of you are thinking, how long must I carry this? And God is saying, until what I planted is strong enough to stand. You are not meant to be their savior, but you are meant to be their support. You are not meant to control them, but you are meant to cover them. And covering requires consistency. Covering requires sacrifice. Covering requires faith when evidence is absent. Do not let others who do not carry your assignment advise you to quit. People who are not part of your mission cannot understand your burden. They will tell you to protect yourself, to move on, to choose ease. But God did not call you to ease. He called you to impact. And impact always costs more than comfort. There is a divine exchange happening that you may not see. As you stay, as you endure, as you love beyond convenience, God is shaping you. He is enlarging your capacity. He is deepening your faith. He's teaching you how to carry weight without collapsing. And what you learn in this assignment will prepare you for greater responsibility ahead. Missions are training grounds for destiny. If you abandon this now, you may avoid pain, but you will also avoid growth. You may escape pressure, but you will also escape promotion. Because God promotes those who prove faithful with people, not those who chase personal gain. Heaven measures success differently than the world. Heaven measures success by obedience, not outcome. This person may not even realize what why will carry for them. They may resist. They may misunderstand. They may disappoint you repeatedly. But missions are not based on appreciation. They are based on obedience. And God sees what they cannot see yet. He sees the future version of them. He sees the healed version. He sees the restored version. And He placed you there not for who they are now, but for who they are becoming. There will be moments when you feel unseen, unappreciated, and exhausted. In those moments, remember that God sees you. He sees every silent sacrifice. He sees every time you stayed when you could have left. And He is not indifferent to your obedience. He is storing it. He is multiplying it. And He will release it at the appointed time. Do not let discouragement speak louder than calling. Feelings change, calling remains, emotions rise and fall. Assignment stands firm. When God gives you a mission, He does not revoke it because it becomes difficult. Difficulty is often confirmation that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I want you to understand something that will anchor your soul. God never asks you to do something without promising His presence within it. You are not alone in this. You are not carrying this by yourself. God walks with you through every moment of uncertainty. He strengthens you when you are weak. He renews you when you are empty. But you must remain where His grace flows. Grace flows in obedience, not escape. If you leave now, you may feel relief for a moment, but peace will not follow. Peace only follows alignment. And alignment only comes through obedience. That is why your spirit resists the idea of leaving. That resistance is not fear, it is truth. Stay. Not because it is easy. Stay because it is assigned. Stay because someone's future is tied to your faithfulness. Say, because God does His greatest work through people who refuse to abandon what He entrusts. Tend to them. And as you stay, something powerful will begin to happen. Your words will carry weight. Your presence will bring stability. Your faith will become contagious. And one day, perhaps when you least expect it, you will look at this person and realize that the very thing that almost broke you became the channel through which God moved most powerfully. Do not rush the process. Do not despise the burden. Do not underestimate the assignment. This person is your mission. Do not leave them now. Heaven is watching. Destiny is unfolding. God is working even when you cannot see it, even when progress feels invisible, even when your heart feels tired, because obedience is doing something in the unseen that escape will never accomplish. And what God is forming through your staying will one day stand as living proof that faithfulness is never wasted, and that when God entrusts you with a soul, He also entrusts you with a purpose that continues unfolding even now, even here, even as you choose once again to remain, to believe, to carry, to pray, to stand, to endure, to love beyond reason, and to walk forward knowing that this mission is not ending yet, and that God is still speaking, still shaping, still moving through you, as long as you do not let go and you do not turn back and you do not surrender to doubt, but remain exactly where you are called to be as the work continues and the assignment unfolds and the purpose deepens without end, without closure, without finality, as God continues to work through obedience that has not yet reached its appointed time. What you are carrying right now is not accidental, and the weight you feel is not meant to crush you, but to shape you. God often hides His greatest works inside prolonged obedience, because only those who remain long enough are trusted to witness the outcome. You may feel like nothing is changing, but God is not working on the surface first. He works in the unseen. While you are focused on behavior, God is shaping character. While you are measuring progress by visible signs, God is rearranging the inner world where real transformation begins. That is why He asks you to stay, because leaving would interrupt a process that is already in motion. Understand this truth deeply. God does not rush redemption. He allows time, pressure, resistance, and silence, because each one serves a purpose. Silence teaches trust. Resistance builds strength. Time reveals sincerity. If God wanted quick results, He would choose force. Instead, He chooses faith. And faith requires endurance. That endurance you are developing now will not only serve this mission, but will become the foundation for future assignments that demand even greater spiritual maturity. There are moments when you wonder if your efforts matter, if your prayers are heard, if your presence makes any difference at all. In those moments, remember that God works through consistency more than intensity. One act of faith repeated daily carries more power than 1,000 dramatic gestures followed by retreat. God sees the quiet obedience, the unseen sacrifices, the strength it takes to remain steady when emotions fluctuate. He honors what others overlook, and He rewards what the world dismisses. Do not expect immediate gratitude or recognition. Missions are not about applause, they are about alignment. Often, the very person you are sent to will not recognize your value until much later, sometimes after the hardest part is over. But your obedience is not dependent on their awareness. It is rooted in your agreement with God. When you agreed to carry this mission, you agreed to trust God's wisdom over human response. There is a refining happening within you that could not occur in comfort. Patience is being stretched beyond what you thought possible. Compassion is being deepened beyond emotion into commitment. Faith is being tested not by miracles, but by monotony. And it is in this steady, unglamorous faithfulness that God is preparing you for greater authority. Authority is not given to those who act impulsively, but to those who have proven they can remain anchored under pressure. You must also understand that missions evolve. The role you play today may not be the role you play tomorrow. God may ask you to speak less and listen more. He may ask you to lead, then later to step back. He may ask you to confront, then later to cover in silence. Flexibility is part of obedience. Staying does not mean stagnation. It means remaining available to God's direction moment by moment. Do not let fear of being misunderstood silence your obedience. Many assignments are misunderstood by others because they are not meant to be explained, only fulfilled. God does not require public approval for private obedience. He only requires trust. When you stop trying to justify your calling to people who cannot see what God has shown you, you free yourself to move with clarity and peace. There will be days when doubt whispers that you are wasting your time, that your energy could be spent elsewhere, that your life would be easier if you walked away. But ease has never been the measure of purpose. God often places purpose in places that require effort, so that you grow into the capacity needed to sustain what He will later give you. What feels heavy now is increasing your spiritual strength, expanding your inner resilience, and teaching you how to carry responsibility without resentment. Remember this, God connects lives not just for individual growth, but for generational impact. What you are doing today may influence outcomes far beyond what you can see. One life stabilized, one heart strengthened, one path redirected can ripple into futures you may never witness. That is why obedience matters even when results are hidden. God sees the full picture. You are responsible only for your part. You are not expected to be perfect in this mission. God is not asking for flawlessness, He's asking for faithfulness. You will make mistakes, you will feel frustration. You will have moments of weakness, but weakness does not disqualify you. Quitting does. Every time you choose to stay despite imperfection, you demonstrate trust in God's ability to work through humanity, not around it. As you continue, you may notice that your perspective shifts. What once irritated you begins to soften. What once angered you begins to reveal deeper wounds. God allows this shift so that compassion replaces judgment. When compassion leads, transformation becomes possible. And compassion is not passive. It is active, patient, and courageous. Do not confuse endurance with silence. Staying does not mean accepting harm or losing your voice. God never asks you to destroy your self-obedience. Boundaries guided by wisdom are part of faithfulness. Strength includes knowing when to speak, when to pause, when to seek counsel, and when to rest. God values your well-being because your capacity matters to the mission. You are allowed to rest without abandoning the assignment. Rest renews strength, escape depletes it. When you feel overwhelmed, turn to God, not away from the mission. He is the source of renewal, clarity, and peace. He will sustain you as long as you remain connected to Him. One day, clarity will come, the fog will lift, the purpose will make sense, but clarity often arrives after commitment, not before. God reveals direction step by step to teach dependence. If He revealed everything at once, faith would be unnecessary. So trust the process, trust the timing. Trust the God who entrusted this mission to you in the first place. You were not chosen randomly. You were chosen intentionally. God saw your heart, your resilience, your capacity to love beyond convenience. He knew you would struggle, but He also knew you would grow. And growth is the real victory here. Growth in faith, growth in patience, growth in strength that does not run when challenged. Stay anchored, stay prayerful, stay open. Let God guide each step. This mission is shaping you as much as it is shaping them, and as long as you remain aligned with God, He will continue to work through you in ways that surpass understanding, deepen purpose, and unfold meaning beyond what words can fully capture. As obedience continues to move forward without resolution, without closure, without finality, while God keeps working through your staying, your trusting, your choosing again and again to remain exactly where He has placed you as the mission continues to breathe. to unfold, to deepen, and to move forward under His guidance and power without end. There is a sacred mystery in how God weaves responsibility into relationship. What feels like obligation is often invitation. God does not force missions upon the unwilling. He awakens something within you that responds before logic has time to object. That response is not emotional attachment, it is spiritual recognition. Your spirit recognizes what your mind is still learning to accept. And the reason it feels heavy at times is because sacred things always carry weight. Anything that matters to God will demand something from you. You must understand that God often assigns people before He explains purpose. Explanation can come later, but obedience must come first. If you wait until everything makes sense, you will miss the moment where faith is required. God values trust more than understanding. He values willingness more than certainty. And this mission exists in that sacred space where trust must lead and certainty must follow. There are times when you feel alone in this calling, as if no one truly understands why you stay, why you continue to invest, why you refuse to walk away. But isolation is not abandonment. Often God separates you from the noise so that His voice becomes clearer. When too many opinions surround an assignment, obedience becomes diluted. God wants your attention undivided, your heart focused, your spirit listening. Do not measure the value of this mission by how it feels on difficult days. Difficulty does not diminish purpose, it confirms it. If there were no resistance, there would be no growth. God uses resistance to reveal what is inside you. Under pressure, your true faith surfaces. Under strain, your true motives are revealed. And through that revelation, God refines you into someone who can carry greater responsibility with humility and strength. You may feel like you are giving more than you are receiving, but missions are not transactions. They are investments. And investments do not yield immediate returns. God works on long timelines because He is building something that lasts. What He is forming now is not fragile. It is not temporary. It is rooted in obedience, shaped by patience, and sustained by faith. There is also something powerful happening beyond what you see. Your decision to stay is breaking cycles. It is interrupting patterns of abandonment, rejection, and instability. Sometimes God places you in someone's life not to fix everything, but to become the first person who does not leave. That alone can open doors that words never could. Consistency becomes a language. Presence becomes a message. Faithfulness becomes a testimony. Do not underestimate the impact of simply remaining. In a world where people leave at the first sign of difficulty, staying becomes revolutionary. Staying declares that God's way is different. Staying demonstrates that commitment is still possible. Staying becomes a living expression of trust in God's wisdom rather than human impulse. There will be moments when you question your strength, when you wonder how much longer you can continue. In those moments, remember that God does not draw from your strength alone. He supplies what He requires. When you reach the end of yourself, you encounter the beginning of His power. Weakness is not failure. It is an invitation to depend more deeply on God. Let God teach you through this mission. Let Him show you how to love with boundaries, how to give without losing yourself, how to care without controlling, how to stand firm without becoming hardened. These lessons cannot be learned in isolation. They are learned in relationship, in responsibility, in the tension between compassion and truth. You are not meant to carry guilt for things you cannot control. God does not expect you to force outcomes. He asks you to remain faithful to your role. Outcomes belong to Him. Release the burden of results and focus on obedience. When you surrender the need to fix everything, peace returns. And peace is a sign that you are aligned with God's will. At times, God allows progress to be slow so that humility can grow. Rapid change can inflate pride, but gradual transformation builds gratitude. God is more interested in depth than speed. He is shaping roots before He allows visible growth. Roots form in darkness, in silence, in stillness. And when roots are strong, storms cannot uproot what God has planted. Your presence in this mission is not unnoticed. Heaven is aware. God sees every quiet moment of faithfulness. He sees the internal battles you fight and the choices you make when no one is watching. And He is not indifferent. He is attentive. He is involved. He is working through you even when you feel uncertain. Hey, there may come a time when this mission changes form, when your role shifts, when the season evolves. God controls seasons. He opens and closes doors with precision. You do not need to force an ending or cling to control. Trust God to guide transitions when they are necessary. Until then, remain attentive, responsive, and anchored in faith. What you are doing now is building spiritual endurance. Endurance is what sustains calling over time. Without endurance, even the strongest passion fades. God is teaching you how to remain steady, not just enthusiastic. Steadiness carries weight in the spiritual realm. It signals maturity. It signals readiness for greater trust. Do not let the enemy convince you that staying is foolish or weak. Staying requires more courage than leaving. Staying requires strength to face uncertainty, patience to endure delay, and faith to believe without evidence. These qualities are not signs of weakness. They are marks of spiritual maturity. Remember that God's plans are layered. What you see now is only one layer. There are purposes intersecting that you may never fully understand, but trust that nothing is wasted. Not your time, not your effort, not your tears. God weaves everything together with intention. As you continue, allow God to deepen your discernment. Learn to recognize His guidance in subtle ways. Sometimes He speaks through peace, sometimes through restraint, sometimes through a quiet assurance that does not shout but remains steady. Follow that guidance. It will keep you aligned even when circumstances fluctuate. You are becoming someone who can carry responsibility without resentment, commitment without control, faith without certainty. This transformation is priceless. It cannot be rushed or replicated. It is forged through experience, through obedience, through choosing to remain when leaving would be easier. And as this mission continues to unfold, know that God is not finished. He is still working, still shaping, still guiding, still strengthening you in ways that go beyond what you can see or feel. Stay attentive, stay humble, stay faithful. Let God continue to move through your obedience, through your presence, through your unwavering choice to remain as the mission breathes, expands, deepens, and continues forward under His direction, without pause, without closure, without finality, as His purpose keeps unfolding through your stay. Now, let this moment become a mirror for your soul. Look honestly at where you stand, not with judgment, but with courage. Ask yourself whether you have been running from what God has entrusted to you, whether you've allowed fear, fatigue, or frustration to speak louder than calling. This is not a moment for excuses. This is a moment for alignment. God is not asking for perfection from you. He is asking for surrender, for renewed commitment, for a heart that says, I will not turn away from what you have placed in my hands. Let this be the point where you stop negotiating with obedience and start walking in it. Let this be the moment where you decide that comfort will no longer outrank purpose, that ease will no longer outweigh responsibility, that emotions will no longer lead where faith must stand. God is calling you deeper, not into confusion, but into clarity. Not into pressure, but into purpose. Not into fear, but into trust. Rise above the noise of doubt and the voices that tell you to abandon what God has marked as sacred. Choose to stand where God placed you. Choose to remain faithful where others would flee. Choose to believe that God knows exactly what He is doing, even when you do not see the full picture. Your obedience today is shaping the strength of your tomorrow. Your faithfulness now is preparing the ground for outcomes you cannot yet imagine. Draw closer to God, not with words alone, but with decision. Let your life reflect agreement with His will. Let your actions confirm what your prayers declare. Walk forward with humility, courage, and unwavering trust, knowing that God walks with you, strengthens you, and works through you as long as your heart remains aligned with Him. And as you move forward from this moment, carry this truth deeply within you. When God assigns a mission, He also releases the grace to fulfill it. When He calls you to stay, He supplies the strength to endure. When He entrusts you with purpose, He never abandons you in the process. Stand firm, stay faithful, walk closer to God with a renewed heart, a steady spirit, and a life fully yielded to His will, allowing His purpose to continue unfolding through you with power, depth, and unshakable conviction.